Number 23, Tennessee 2024 preview on Good Morning College Football. Hello and welcome to Good Morning College Football from campus2canton.com. I'm Nicholas Ian Allen, and today we will be discussing the number 23 ranked team in our CFB Winning Edge Team Strength preseason power rankings, the Tennessee Volunteers, and is a little bit of a tongue twister early on. I have to admit, had to start the recording over trying to say number 23 Tennessee 2024 team preview. But we are here. We are back for another week of Good Morning College Football. And as you probably know, fall camps are opening across the country. There are a handful of teams who've been at it for a little bit. Florida State this morning, when we were getting ready to record, was hitting the field for practice number 5. Georgia Tech, who will be squaring off against the Seminoles in Dublin, has been at it as well. New Mexico, SMU, Nevada, and Hawaii all up and running and through the first full week of their respective spring camps. But week 1 teams are kicking off. I saw, just scrolling through before we got started, Wake Forest hitting the field, UCF. So more and more teams this week and throughout this week, depending on when that first game is kicking off, we'll be hitting the practice field. And of course, more news will be coming out of those fall camp practices, recaps, quotes from coaches, meeting with the media afterward. Some teams have better access as far as practice observation than others, but we will do the very best we can to find news and pass it along. Of course, a huge thanks to those who are on the ground doing that work, reporting, newspaper beat reporters, team sites, national outlets, a lot of folks really putting in great work together, and we really appreciate it. We try to go through, read as much of that work as possible, try to find maybe interesting or potentially impactful nuggets to pass along, because now that we are 26 days from week 0 kicking off, and with most of the college football world moving into week 1 mode, being inside that 30-day window prior to their season kicking off, we're going to have more and more news to discuss. So I've mentioned this before in our more recent team previews, but today still going to be a little bit longer Tennessee specific preview. We'll really get in depth because there's not yet a ton of news to discuss. But as more and more teams open, as more and more starts to happen, once teams start going full pads, and especially if there are any injury reports to pass along, any additional roster movement, because this time of year, sometimes you'll get a player somewhat unexpectedly not be on the fall roster. Sometimes you'll even see a late transfer pop up. So we'll try to keep track of all those as well and pass it along as we see. And that bit of information is going to take up a little more and more of our shows here on Good Morning College Football. And so the team preview won't be as in-depth, won't be as long, which some of you may prefer, I don't know. But today, our Tennessee team preview is going to be pretty similar to the first 23 teams that we've discussed in depth so far this season. But if you have not already, we very much would appreciate you giving this video a like. Thank you for subscribing to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel as well. And of course, if you have subscribed to campus2canton.com, where you can do so for as little as $2.99 per month. We very much appreciate that as well. So there are a range of tiers at C2C to give you access to tons of written content available on the site, tools, analysis, rankings for college fantasy football, C2C, Devi, all kinds of great stuff to get you prepared for your upcoming fantasy leagues. Those freshman supplemental drafts are ongoing. Have personally just a few more yet to start, but if you're looking to get caught up on all the incoming true freshmen, check out the freshman guide from Campus to Canton. Also, the CFF guide is available now. Tons of great stuff available at campuscanton.com, including, if you're interested in some of the sheets that we will discuss today, our CFB Winning Edge team profiles, our returning production database, also our CFB Winning Edge stat projections, which give you hopefully mostly opinion removed look at how teams project based on a 3-year weighted window of each team, head coach, and play caller, and how those impact the current 134 FBS team setup. That is available to our C2C Winning Edge and all 22 tier members. And then last but not least, and I want to mention this as well, that very first tier at Campus Canton as a subscriber, the $2.99 per month packages do include our new best ball rankings, which the Underdog Fantasy best balls are up and running and getting a lot of interest and action. And the folks behind the scenes at Campus to Canton have worked hard to quickly implement specific best ball rankings that you can use in that format. They've also already done several updates based on how things have evolved, emerged, and changed, as they compare to more of the other, traditional formats that folks have played. The CFF ADP differs a bit from these best ball drafts from Underdog. So if you're looking to get involved in those and want a little help, or at least get a little lay of the land before you really dig in, please do check us out at campus2canton.com. So all that in mind, let's talk a little bit about Tennessee. And again, fall camps are going on. We discussed some notes last week about the Hawaii receiving corps. Was doing some reading this morning and over the weekend. Not a ton new compared to the things that we read over spring practice or over the summer about teams like Nevada or SMU. I mean, there's a lot of generic talk, quotes from head coaches or coordinators. In New Mexico, I was reading up about Devin Dampier, the starting quarterback there for the Lobos, somebody who's a bit of a CFF sleeper, looks like a potential very productive dual threat quarterback and an interesting new system under head coach Bronco Mendenhall there. Georgia Tech has press conferences with its coordinators and head coaches after each practice. Florida State gets great coverage. The team at 247 Sports that covers Florida State does great work. Plenty of other sites as well. I believe the Sports Illustrated team site there that covers the Seminoles gives a lot of information, but not much of it is really that different. Like, DJ Uiagalelei was maybe a little shaky in practice one before settling down. Now ramping up and a little more consistent, which is good. The running back room is really deep. Lawrence Tuafele is having a great start to fall camp, it sounds like. But for the most part, no major earth-shattering news, so we don't have to dig in too deep just yet. So let's get started with our Tennessee 2024 preview. And this one to me is quite interesting because for a little while, for the last 3 or 4 previews that we've done, it seemed, especially with teams like UCF, where we are much higher on projections wise than others. There are a few others in there as well. North Carolina is a big one. That was sort of we strung a few together where it was like our CFB Winning Edge projections, which again are not based on my personal opinion, not based on anybody else's opinion. It's factors of us building these individual player ratings based on recruiting ratings coming out of high school, adjusting for experience and production to be able, so players on the field are able to play their way to a higher rating by meeting certain production benchmarks to add points to that individual player rating. We build all those up into position ratings and unit ratings and overall roster strength ratings. We have head coach ratings that go into that. We have team performance ratings that go into that. So based on how those teams grade out on a variety of advanced stats, throw it all into the mix, see what comes out. And basically just trust the process. We put a lot of time and energy into that. And so I don't want my opinion to mess that up. And yeah, sometimes it, spits out something unexpected. And sometimes we're a little higher on a team than most of the college football world. Sometimes we're a little lower. And, switching gears to Tennessee, pretty much everyone, as far as college football media, from a national landscape, a lot of the people that we've referenced in the first 24 editions of these more in-depth team previews are higher on Tennessee than we are. A lot of the computer-based projection systems, just about all of them, are higher on Tennessee than our numbers. So after being really optimistic, numerically speaking, on a handful of teams, we're finally getting to one here where for good or bad, we might end up looking smart, we might end up looking very silly. Our projections have the Vols quite a bit lower at 23 nationally, number 10 in the SEC. So how do we compare to others? How do we compare to the odds makers, the market? At DraftKings, Tennessee's regular season win total as of this morning was 8.5 wins. The Vols are 12th in national championship odds at 35-1. Also 12th in the odds to make the college football playoff at plus 170, and 7th in the SEC. So the odds makers in the market are higher on the Vols than we are. Other outlets, media outlets, and projection models are as well. ESPN's Football Power Index actually has Tennessee as a top 10 team, number 9 in its current format. Andy Staples of On3 has the Vols 11th in his post-spring top 25 prediction posted several weeks ago, a couple of months ago. Kelly Ford, the K Ford ratings have Tennessee 13th, as does the Sporting News and Athlon Sports in the preseason magazine. ESPN's Mark Schlabach with a power ranking post-spring and post-spring portal has Tennessee 15th. SP Plus at ESPN, Bill Connolly's best in market for quite a while. College Football Analytics projections have Tennessee 16th. Stuart Mandel of The Athletic also has the Vols 16th. Beta Rank has Tennessee at number 20. And Phil Steele has Tennessee 24th in his top 40 predictions. Doesn't have Tennessee as a top 25 team in his power poll, but did have Tennessee expected to finish as a top 25 team in those more opinion-based predictions. So just about everybody else higher on Tennessee than us. And we'll dig into why exactly that is. And as sort of odd as it may sound, because quarterback Nico Iamaleava has, an elite recruit, looks like a perfect fit in Josh Heupel's offense. Also, there's some folks who weren't very pleased with or impressed with Joe Milton as the quarterback at Tennessee. So a lot of folks see the quarterback position taking a big step forward for the Vols this year, and that very well may be. But again, going back to how our team rating starts, those individual player ratings and experience and production is a big part of that. And Nico's just not that experienced. Played in 5 games, started 1, looked great, played very, very well. Impressive performance, 4 touchdowns against Iowa in that Citrus Bowl win. But in the grand scheme and how we compare to other players at that position and just sort of how he stacks up in a very, very important spot in our power rankings, that starting quarterback individual player rating, he's just a little lower than is what typically we see as maybe one of the best in college football. Fortunately, he'll have plenty of opportunity, and I think very quickly will add production to increase his individual player rating. Tennessee, if those offensive numbers come as we would expect with Heupel and his background, and Iamaleava stepping in and being very, very productive in that system, Tennessee's overall power rating is going to increase pretty rapidly. So we'll dig into the specifics there a little bit later. But on the note of quarterbacks, a piece we've mentioned, I think, in every preview that we've done so far, David Hale of ESPN last month did a very in-depth piece putting every quarterback room into tiers and then giving a little bit of a blurb about each team and specifically each quarterback usually, or just sort of the situation that they're in. And Hale put Tennessee in tier 4 alongside Kansas State, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and USC, teams that all, the commonality there, new starters, first-time starters, but players with really, really high ceilings, players with a lot of potential to step in and, maybe Nebraska here. I know Dylan Raiola is a 5-star. For me, maybe tier 4 is a little too high, but K-State, especially with Avery Johnson, Oklahoma with Jackson Arnold, USC, Miller Moss most likely. Those players are probably going to step in with Nico there as well and be very, very good right away. But the note here from Hale on the Tennessee quarterback situation, reading here from the piece, says, as an FBS offensive coordinator and head coach since 2011, Josh Heupel's offenses have averaged 3,551 passing yards and 29 touchdowns a year. In his 6 seasons as a head coach at UCF and Tennessee, his QBs have thrown a total of 30 interceptions. So 6 years, a total of 30 picks. Very impressive. 5 of those to Milton last season. So right on track there, statistically speaking. And then 3,500 yards. You actually, last season, Tennessee came up a little bit short of that. But this year, certainly could expect some very similar numbers. Our projections at CFP Winning Edge currently call for Nico to throw for 2,660 yards, but that's with playing 85% of, or accounting for 85% of the attempts, partly because of injuries in the past or guys moving in and out of the starting lineup. If we were to upgrade that to, say, 95% of snaps, we would have Nico right around 3,000 yards, 23 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions. That'd be a very solid 12-game regular season. Again, just the regular season. If Tennessee were to get to the SEC championship game, which certainly our numbers aren't quite there, but I do think that there's a path, or of course to a bowl game or even the college football playoff, those numbers, certainly he'll have an opportunity to add to those. But as it stands right now, we're not, super, super high on Nico's passing production potential immediately. But I think that he has a very high ceiling and certainly could outperform our numbers. Also have him expected to go for over 400 rushing yards. Think that maybe there's even a little room on top of that, and 7-8 touchdowns. So from a fantasy perspective, think that Nico's definitely in line for big numbers potentially if he can stay healthy and everything goes according to plan. So let's dig into, and I'm going to share my screen here, Tennessee in 2023. pulling up our CFB Winning Edge team profiles, which if you first time seeing it, we have some projected depth charts here right under our big information block that has that number 23 power ranking, has a lot of stats from last season, returning production numbers, roster strength, coaching ratings, team performance ratings, overall in a 3 or 5 year window, offense and defense. In the middle of the page, we've got those recruiting numbers. You get average player rating from sites like 247 Sports, the composite ratings there, Rivals, On3, our video game ratings. That's our individual player ratings, very similar to the EA Sports College Football 25 video game. Those ratings for starters at each position, the 2 deep as listed in the depth chart. Our position strength ratings are a weighted position and unit rating, where the starters get the biggest bit of that weight, and then the rest of the group sort of fills out. And you can see how Tennessee stacks up there. We'll dig into those numbers a little bit later. Our 2024 schedule and projections in our 3 different projection models. And then down there at the bottom, how did each team finish in the previous season? So for the Vols in 2023, 9-4 overall, 4-4 in the SEC. Started out 5-1 with that loss to Florida. A little bit of a surprise, perhaps, coming in, but statistically speaking, deserved that. With just a 3% post-game win expectancy, according to collegefootballdata.com. But Tennessee dominant in those other games in the first 5 victories of the season, 5-1 to start. Ended up losing to Alabama, played tough, but still right around a 20% post-game win expectancy number. So again, if this is your first time hearing about that, if you were to play that game 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, however many, and the box score numbers were the same, according to collegefootballdata.com, you would expect Tennessee to have won that game against Alabama roughly 1/5 of the time, about 20% of the time. But the rest of Tennessee's schedule mostly went according to plan, at least statistically speaking. Big post-game number against Tennessee, UConn, perfect. Losses to Missouri and Georgia, where they were a bit lopsided, and the Vols had just a 0% chance, would never have won that game with those post-game numbers. Get back in line with a big win over Vandy, and then incredibly impressive performance against Iowa on both sides of the football. 35-0, great way to end the season, get Nico that starting, that early start. Get him an opportunity to see what he can do on, as a freshman, and worked out incredibly well. Carry that momentum into the offseason. How will that work for the Vols? So looking at some of these numbers from last year, our major stats that we reference the most are featured here. And also these numbers reflect games against FBS opponents only and in the regular season only. So those bowl game numbers for Nico, not part of these stats, also not part of our team performance rating. So do keep that in mind. It's possible Tennessee might have inched up a little bit based on that final game of the year in that bowl game. But these numbers reflect the regular season only and these rankings as well. Tennessee, top 25 in scoring margin, 33rd in scoring offense, 39th defensively. Again, FBS opponents only, regular season only, if you're wondering why those differ from what you might see at another source. Net yards per play, even better, top 15 nationally, top 20 on the offensive side of the ball, top 30 defensively. So the ball is very solid across the board there when you're looking at net yards per play. Net points per drive, these are according to Brian Fremeau of bcftoys.com. Maybe my favorite individual stat, a little bit lower for Tennessee. So better on, accumulating big yardage, but getting into the end zone each drive and the percentage or, the amount of points that the team puts up each time it's got the football room for improvement. Still 35th nationally, top 40 on offense, top 50 on defense. And then net yards per pass attempt, that is the biggest area of improvement potentially, and certainly something that Iamaleava could improve upon for the Vols. 46th in net yards per pass attempt. The defense giving up a little bit too many big plays, more FBS average than, right there fighting for a top 35, top 25 type spot. So hopefully the defense, if you're a Tennessee fan, if you're expecting the Vols to overachieve compared to our projections, that's an area where probably a little bit will go a long way. Success rate, Tennessee 25th in net success percentage. On offense, fringe top 25, defensively inside the top 40. And then we use an EPA equivalent from collegefootballdata.com. They call it PPA, but Tennessee ranks 33rd in that as far as EPA margin, 37th on the offensive side of the ball, 53rd defensively. As far as pace goes, in terms of time between snaps, Tennessee on offense last season, number 2 in the country, so only one program moves faster. And as far as plays per game, those numbers fall a little bit, but still expecting Josh Heupel, as is often the case as the head coach and play caller, moving very fast. So that's another reason why we would expect Iamaleava specifically, but this Tennessee offense as a whole, to be very productive, just because playing a lot of snaps, a lot of plays, moving very quickly. But Heupel is a top 10 head coach according to our team performance based historical team performance coach ratings. Top 3 offensive play caller, but defensive coordinator rating top 25 as well. 20th in team performance overall last season, takes into account all these stats and many, many more. But a top 20 team last year, statistically speaking, top 35 on offense, top 30 on defense. And this Tennessee team is has really been trending in the right direction. Understandably, a lot of excitement, but another reason perhaps why we are a little bit lower than some, and touched on it, just the fact that Iamaleava is not super experienced, but losing production. And we don't use returning production specifically in our projections, but when a team ranks 102nd in returning production overall, like Tennessee does, 15th in the SEC, the players who are left over most of the time, unless there's just a huge influx of experienced and productive transfers, they're not going to rate quite as high. And so putting all those position and unit ratings together, Tennessee's just, not quite there yet, but certainly I think has the potential, as we'll get to. But Milton was a personal favorite of mine. In this time last year, college fantasy football, I was highly invested in Joe Milton. Didn't necessarily work out didn't work out super well for me. A lot of people were right, and I was not, you could say, from just an overall production standpoint. But Milton still did some good things, had a lot of leadership qualities that his coaching staff was always very complimentary of. But the overall numbers, room for improvement. As we said, Iamaleava probably shooting for 3,000 yards. That yards per attempt number, hoping to get that into the 9s, maybe even a little bit higher. Taking care of the football will continue to be big for Tennessee. Hale mentioned the interception numbers for Heupel. So you expect that those numbers are going to continue to look pretty good for Nico. Hopefully that will be the case. As far as rushing production goes, losing 1,000-yard rusher Jalen Wright with his big play, 7.4 yards per pass attempt. That will be a loss, but Dylan Sampson steps in, looks highly capable of carrying just as heavy of a workload, if not more. Tied for the team lead with 7 rushing touchdowns as well. Think he's in line for a great season because both Wright and Jabari Small are gone. So, in theory, you would expect Sampson to pick up instead of being, one of three relatively equal share workload type running backs. I think that he's probably going to get, 150, maybe more carries, especially considering Cam Seldon was dealing with an injury coming out of spring camp. So Sampson, fully healthy and experienced, probably in line to do quite well as far as replacing that production from Jalen Wright. But there is some depth there as well behind Seldon. We'll get into in the receiving core. Losing Ramel Keaton and tight end McCullen Castles. Not overwhelming losses, but experienced players, certainly top two tight ends when you account for Jacob Warren. So really, Tennessee will be relying on some youth at that position. But Squirrel White and his nearly 100 targets are back, hoping for a little bit more scoring production from White, but certainly expect that he will be peppered with targets once again, maybe have an opportunity for 1,000 yards. Chris Brazzell II, transfer from Tulane, comes in with a really, really high ceiling. Think that he'll step in and perform quite well. Could end up, as that leader in touchdowns, maybe in yards, probably not receptions, but might have an opportunity for more, big plays down the field, especially if White's getting, the lower average depth of target, single digits last season for him, 9.2. Brazzell at Tulane, 14.5. So more of the guy who was being used to attack downfield. Expect that could be the same. Might fit into that Keaton role potentially, who, Keaton, 18.3 yards per catch last year, 19 average depth of target, 19 yards. So we'll see. We'll be tuned in to spring practices and see who looks like they're most likely to step into what role. But that's sort of my assumption coming in, that Brazzell might have the best opportunity there. Dante Thornton Jr. Never really seemed to put it all together last season, was dealing with injuries a lot of the way, but big size, physically a big target with great speed. So think that there's potential for him to have a little bit better year this season. Brew McCoy suffered a very serious injury, limited him to 5 games last year. If he's back and fully healthy, certainly a starter according to most projections, and probably in line for a good year as well. But as we know, Tennessee rolls in a lot of receivers, a lot of deep routes, and try to keep those guys fresh. So we'll see plenty of Thornton, Chaz Nimrod, Caleb Webb, the rest of that group as well. On the offensive line, a lot of players got starting experience last year. Only one player with double-digit starts last season is back. That's Javontes Spraggins. Losing Ollie Lane out of eligibility, Jeremiah Crawford also, and Gerald Mincy, who transferred out. A little bit of a hit to depth, but as you can see, Campbell and Mays limited by injury, Campbell, I think, as well. Both of those guys are back. And then Dane Davis has been, maybe your sixth man for several years there at Tennessee. But 2 others with starting experience return. And then the addition of Lance Hurd as a transfer from LSU, likely to step in to be the left tackle this season, is a big addition. So Tennessee offensively, when we adjust for incoming transfers, ranks 106th in returning production. If we were just to look at our raw returning production numbers, the Vols actually would rank 85th. So nationally, not adjusting for any players coming in through the transfer portal, just who's coming back, who's not from the 2023 season, Tennessee a little bit better as far as that raw returning production number. So you could make an argument, because Tennessee is really relying on transfers to step in, get acclimated. It's more so kind of passing the baton to somebody, kind of the more traditional, old-fashioned way of doing it in college football, right? The guy who was a backup last season, stepping into that starting role, developing those players internally. if you think that there's some value to that at a place like Tennessee, perhaps that number could indicate that, all right, the level of continuity perhaps for the Vols, even if it's not overall experience returning, it's players who've been in the system, who've learned, who've developed. So offensively, I think Tennessee's probably going to be in a pretty good spot. Speaking of defense, though, the raw returning production number is 107th nationally for Tennessee. Gets a little bit better when you adjust for incoming transfers. A big part of that, Jacoby Thomas, Jalen McMurray, Jermod McCoy, all played significant snaps at their former schools, but Tennessee hit pretty hard, both by graduation and transfers out. Leading tackler Elijah Herring moving on, Wesley Walker, Tamarian McDonald, Nico Slaughter, Tyler Barron, who, of course, was a disruptive presence on the edge. All those players left Knoxville with eligibility, moving on to other locations. Losing Aaron Beasley, Jalen McCullough, Gabe Judy Lawley to graduation, bit of a hit to experience and depth as well. A couple of losses to graduation on the defensive line also. So, Tennessee, those known for its explosive offense and Heupel and the fast pace and the big plays through the air. But this Tennessee team last season graded out quite well on defense, as we'll see, or as we did see, and having to replace the players on that side of the football, maybe just a little bit more concerning than the holes that were left due to guys moving on the offensive side of the ball. So going back to our team profiles, you saw a glimpse of it earlier, but our projected offensive depth chart. Nico atop the quarterback room, and his video game rating is an 86. So as a redshirt freshman, as a former 5-star recruit, that's what it is. That's about as high as it gets. He just hasn't been able to add to that quite yet. The potential, if we were to give Nico some projected production, which you can make an argument that maybe we should, that might bump him up to a 90 or so. But I think as a redshirt freshman making his first regular season start in week 1, I'm comfortable with the 86. I think that it'll take care of itself, his level of production. But right now, that lack of experience, that lack of projected production points added to his video game rating makes Tennessee on paper, the way we calculate it, which is not a perfect system, but it's been a pretty good system for us since we started and have tweaked it since 2018. Tennessee ranks 57th in our quarterback position strength ratings. Maybe you're screaming, that's way too low, that's ridiculous, that's the worst thing I've ever heard. Hey, that's fair. If it plays out and he plays like one of the better quarterbacks in college football, very quickly that rating will reflect that. But as of right now, a lot of room for improvement at the quarterback position, and depth at the quarterback position, quite honestly, is a little bit of a concern for me. I've got true freshman Jake Merklinger, another highly rated recruit, 4-star kid coming out of high school, as the projected backup. Most things that I've read would have Gaston Moore as that top backup. But Moore, as you can see, as a former unrated player coming out, would be an even farther downgrade just as far as that individual player rating goes. So quarterback, hopefully Nico will be able to stay fully healthy. A lot of the things that we've read, because he is quite a slim quarterback, up to 210 in weight, adding to that 6'6" frame. Hopefully that'll, he'll be able to withstand hits if they rely on him to run the football like they did in the bowl game, or if he's going to be, under pass rush pressure. Hopefully he'll be able to stay fully healthy, because if not, then my concern for Tennessee is even greater. That at least on paper, the depth looks like perhaps a little bit of an issue at the quarterback position. But Dylan Sampson back, looks like he's going to be in line for a pretty heavy workload. Cam Seldon, hopefully he'll be back and fully healthy. He was a favorite of the Campus to Canton recruiting team and the folks who really dig into scouting those high school prospects for his abilities as both a runner and a receiver. Hopefully he'll get an opportunity to get back and show what he can do. But there are others competing for playing time there as well. The wide receiver group, Brazzell, not super highly rated as far as our way of calculating it. But again, if he emerges as one of the top playmakers, especially as that big play receiver for Tennessee this season, that rating will shoot up and reflect that. The offensive line looks good on paper, looks solid, not spectacular at any one position, but no major weak spots. The Vols have recruited really well on the offensive line, number 12 in average 247 composite rating. So I'll sometimes use the term raw talent. That's more what I'm referring to there. Top 15, just as far as talent on hand, if you look at those 247 ratings. On the defensive side of the ball, experience up front, really something to build around. James Pearce wasn't even a starter last season, but was an all-SEC performer, put up 17 production points, a lot of that with pressure, just a real presence on the edge. But Tennessee has size in the middle and experience with Amari Thomas and Bryson Eason coming back. The linebacker unit is, not bringing back a ton of production from last season, but Keenan Peely coming back. He was a starter early on before going down with an injury. And as you can see, has 26 starts under his belt in his career. The secondary, if you're looking on paper, maybe the more concerning unit, just from, again, a playing time experience standpoint. Tennessee's having to rely on some incoming first-year transfers to step into that starting lineup. No returning starters among the 5 in our projected depth chart there. So that, and we talked about how yards per pass attempt was maybe statistically speaking among our most important favorite stats. The one that needed to be improved upon the most. Having an inexperienced secondary makes you a little bit worried. That secondary ranks 85th in our position strength rating, 16th in the SEC. Hopefully, again, if you're a Tennessee fan, hopefully we're just underrating that unit. I mean, they do rank right around 40th in average 247 rating, so should be better than, below FBS average, worst in the SEC on paper. Should be better than that. Maybe they will. Probably they will. But as it stands right now, the way we calculate it on paper, that's the biggest potential weak spot on this Tennessee roster as a whole, but certainly on the defense. So how does it all work out for the game-by-game projections? We mentioned that DraftKings has Tennessee's regular season win total at 8.5. We come in below that. Probably not a surprise, as we're lower in our power ratings than just about everyone else. The schedule is manageable. 39th as far as strength of schedule for an SEC team is on the lower end. Tennessee gets some favorable draws. Does have to play Alabama, as always. Does have to play Georgia. Getting the Crimson Tide at home is key. We know what happened last time. Having to go to Athens is less ideal, certainly, for the Vols. Get a tough non-conference opponent in NC State on a neutral field in week 2, but should take care of business in the 3 other non-conference games. And that NC State game is obviously winnable. We do have Tennessee as a slight favorite there. But 3-1 in the non-conference perhaps seems like worst case scenario. 4-0 is definitely possible. Back-to-back road games to start SEC play, maybe not ideal, but getting a week off after the trip to Norman before having to play Arkansas, Florida, and Alabama back-to-back. That's tough, but both those games are at home. Actually, 4 straight home games with Kentucky and Mississippi State coming to Knoxville as well. Vanderbilt on the road, at the end as usual. On paper, looks like a pretty good spot for Tennessee to be highly favored. But there are some toss-up games. There are games where, that Arkansas matchup, you would think Tennessee is probably clearly a better team than Arkansas. They're having to go to Fayetteville, and the Hogs were highly active in the transfer portal. Have a new play caller back in Bobby Petrino, so maybe flying a little under the radar and within striking distance of Tennessee, especially at home. Florida is, a lot of people expect Billy Napier is going to be fired. Might be by that game when it kicks off, but Florida also very talented, could end up winning a couple of games maybe that weren't expected, and think that game is definitely within reach. Tennessee favored solidly, but by less than a touchdown. So just a 61% projected win percentage, similar to those second order wins we were talking about, post game numbers. We do the same thing. That's how we get our projected win totals on the front end. Convert those projected point spreads to those projected win percentages, add them all up. That's where the 7.6 comes for. So with a Kentucky team that, again, we have Tennessee favored, but very close, only 54% there. So only get credit for a little more than half a win, even if Tennessee, is favored to win that game. Don't give them full credit for that victory. But I think that this Tennessee team, I understand why others are higher. I understand why other projection models that don't drill down as deep as we do on individual player ratings, where Tennessee just doesn't quite stack up quite to what expectations are at the quarterback position, even the running back position, but the secondary as well. I understand why others who look just more at take a talent number based on recruiting history, take a overall returning production number. I can understand why those projection systems are higher on Tennessee than we are. I understand maybe we're opening ourselves up. It's a little risky that by drilling down as deep as we do, perhaps we're underrating a Tennessee team, especially on the offensive side of the ball, that you think is established well enough that they're going to be good. Whoever they were going to put it at quarterback, probably going to put up good numbers. They just so happen to put in a former 5-star who's gotten a little bit, gotten his feet wet as a true freshman and been groomed for this starting role, has an opportunity to just explode as far as putting up big numbers. Yeah, maybe we'll end up looking silly, but hopefully if this Tennessee offense is as good as it can be, as good as a lot of people think it will be, our numbers will catch up because those production points will get added. Those player ratings will increase. Nico might be a 95 by the end of the season. And at that point, Tennessee's probably a top 10 team, most likely. So it could go either way. Maybe our numbers just show a little bit more vulnerability in a couple of spots, some areas where depth is an issue. Maybe the talent isn't quite what you would hope it to be. And maybe, we'll end up looking smart for our little more middle of the road, shall we say, or even lower Tennessee projection compared to most. But there's definitely the possibility that we won't. Definitely the possibility that will be quite silly if Tennessee plays like a top 10 team this season and is in the mix for an SEC championship and playoff spot. Personally, I could see that, but I'm trusting the process, and our numbers aren't quite there. So that will do it for us today. Thank you again for joining us. We will be back on Wednesday for our 25th team preview. We've got Utah on tap, but depending on the level of news and what we've got to discuss as fall camps continue to open, we might not get to 40-45 minutes of a team preview. So we'll have to sort of play things by ear here a little bit over the next week or so. But I imagine very soon, once we get hundreds of practice reports each day, that our time available for this in-depth team preview is probably going to get a little lower and lower and lower as we move on. But thank you for joining us today. Thank you for giving this video a like. Thank you for subscribing to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. And of course, thank you if you have signed up at campustocanton.com. You can join for as little as $2.99 per month, get access to a ton of great content written on the site, rankings, tools, Discord access, all kinds of great stuff. Or if you join us at the C2C Winning Edge or All 22 tier level, get access to all 134 teams in our team profiles, our returning production database, our stat projections as well. So hope everyone has a great day. We will be back on Wednesday for our next episode of Good Morning College Football. I'm Nicholas Ian Allen. Take care.